This presentation is intended for STEM Language Arts 9 students who've already gathered their data. These are your next steps. First, reminder of the 4 questions for research. Your research question is focused on what do you want to know. Your data is focusing on what data can answer that question, whereas your method focuses on how you will gather those data, and the analysis is what you will do with the data once you have those data. That's where we're at right now. Here's a quick overview of the next steps. First, make sure you finished all revisions from your proposal. Don't worry about doing anything else with your data until you finish all of those. You don't want to have to go back and do that again later. Second, complete data analysis per your plan. Whatever your plan was, do what it said. If you have to change from that, let's cover it in the process of chapters 6 through 8. Once you've completed the data analysis, then go ahead and start focusing on the rest of the slideshow and what to do for chapters 6, 7, and 8. After you've finished doing 6, 7, and 8, then check that you've revised all verb tense from your proposal to past tense, with the exception of your instrument. Make sure you go back and change all that. If you had future tense anywhere in there, with the exception of your instrument, go ahead and go back and change that. Finally, make sure you take care of any necessary revisions to your title page, such as naming it Research Study as opposed to Research Proposal, and changing the date due or date submitted. And also check your Works Cited page if you've added anything in since your proposal. For Chapter 6 for the data, it's a really short chapter, oftentimes only a few sentences or a paragraph in length. 2 parts to it, and 2 ways you grade it. First, the process and the plan. State whether your data, the gathering process, followed your plan precisely, meaning exactly. And if you did, then all I have to say is, the process followed the plan exactly. If you made any changes, then indicate, if any, and all deviations from your proposal, anything you did differently, any adjustments you made from what you originally had planned. If you didn't follow the plan exactly, here's what you have to say what those changes were. Next thing you'll see on the evaluation sheet, which was shared with you on email, is the raw data. 2 ways to do that. Either include a printed copy of the digital responses, or you include all hard copy questionnaires in the binder. You don't have to use a binder, most students do. Sometimes even a folder isn't thick enough to hold all questionnaires. Recommendation is, if your raw data is going to be more than a few pages, then just make a note on your Chapter 6 page here, where you state how you follow the process and the plan. Just state that in a note that all completed questionnaires can be found at the back of the report. Don't make us wonder and try to figure out when we should start reading again. Just put it at the back, and if at all possible, use dividers if you need to keep things separated. Alright, for Chapter 7 there's a lot to cover in here, so let's make sure we keep good at this. First, the data that you present, you want to put that in a very straightforward manner. Oftentimes people are going to use tables to present all the data. This isn't the raw forms, it's not all the individual responses, but it is a way to show all the data at one time. Again, most people use tables to indicate that. You might have rows that are potentially based on each question, or columns based on a question, and then the responses are below. For the data explained, using sentences here, explain to the reader each relevant statistic. You're not going to state everything in the table, but you are going to state some important things as observations. You're not going to say what it has to do with your predictions or research questions. All you're doing is stating the highlights of what is presented in the table. The table is going to be too much information for the average reader, so make sure you explain that in sentences before you go on. For the graphs, make sure you represent all data in the most helpful, clearest graphs possible, not tables, since you already did that. The key for the graphs is to label each graph so its unique purpose is clear to the reader. A graph that's not labeled is a graph that's useless. When you do graphs, make sure you include raw totals, not just percentages, because if you have 25%, is that 1 out of 4 or is it 25 out of 100? It makes a big difference. Make sure you purposefully vary color and the size of graphs, not just types of graphs. So if things are related, make sure they have a similar color scheme or similar sizes to that. If it's more important, it should be larger. If it's less important or more idiosyncratic, it should be a smaller graph. Use headings and captions as necessary. Again, heading is simply the label for the graph itself. A caption is a full statement explaining the purpose of that graph, what that shows you in particular. Also, Avoid using myriad simple graphs. I had one student once turn in 47 different 2-variable pie graphs. I don't need that many yeses and nos. Put it together in a way that actually makes more sense. So use fewer, or slightly more complex graphs instead of all those small individual graphs. The section labeled Compare Contrast Predictions to Results. For each numbered prediction, state precisely how the data either aligns with the corresponding proof statement or disproof statement. That's why we had to be so precise with chapter 5, So you don't just say yes or no. State the data and or statistics which prove or disprove that particular prediction. You can't round up, you can't average. State the actual numbers that back it up. For margin of error, this is an area that sometimes students find a little bit confusing. You're supposed to out yourself for every mistake, every misjudgment, every poor choice you made in the entire process. Here you actually share that. So describe every mistake, every flaw, every deviation from your plan which may have tainted or affected the validity. Validity we can think of in a simple sense as the trueness or accuracy of your results. What might make the data less believable, for example. Some results of margin of error, some examples of margin of error type mistakes can be, did you assume too much? Did you assume too many things? Did you give people too much credit? Did you realize later that you'd actually made some assumptions which you didn't type directly into your proposal? What things didn't go smoothly for data gathering or analysis? The fastest way to know that there's error in your study is for you to claim there's no errors in your study. Something didn't work out as well. You didn't see something up front. You didn't notice something happening before it actually took place. That's where your margin of error comes in. All mistakes that were made, anything that leaves it from being totally useful, that is what you want to indicate in margin of error. Typically, this is going to be in sentences and paragraphs. You still want to avoid using first person, however. For Chapter 8, there's 3 parts to this. First, the final answer to the research questions. So you restate each numbered research question, copy and paste, and then state the answer your finished study now provides to that specific individual question. Some students find they have to actually go reverse order and leave their main question, which was question number 1, and answer that one last, having addressed all the other individual sub-questions. The section for suggestions on future research. You need to offer at least 2 suggestions for other researchers who may be interested in researching the same topic or in replicating your study. Please note, this is not what you do differently. That's coming up later. So the idea is that your research has some value. What should they know? What should they consider? What should they do differently? What should they learn about more? What studies might they find that are relevant? Should they do the same study with a different population? Should they ask a question that you didn't ask? Should they test the same group 5 years from now and see if their answers have changed? That sort of thing. The last section of the conclusion is what I learned. This is finally the part where once again you get to use first person. You're going to indicate 3 major ideas. This could be in short paragraphs, including support or explanation. These are not bullets, these are not numbered. In the what I learned, you explained what you learned about doing research, what you learned about yourself, and or what you learned about your topic. Go deeper with this one. It may not look like much on the evaluation sheet. This is what matters most out of the entire project. So put some time and effort and some deeper thought into this. And again, once you finish chapters 6 through 8, go back, check your verb tense, and check your title page and works cited page. Exemplars will be available in the room still, but make sure you get help as you need it.